As a community, we build empathy, curiosity, joy, and connection when we share stories with you. Welcome to Storytellers Project, part of the USA Today network.
Hello, everyone. I'm LeBron Hill, opinion and engagement reporter with the Tennessean here in Nashville, Tennessee, and an MC and coach with the Storytellers Project. We so appreciate you sharing your evening with us. Tonight, we're joining 5 Americans from across the nation to create community. Since 2016, the Storytellers Project has brought more than 100 shows each year to communities across the country. But we've canceled our in-person season as a part of the USA Today network's response to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So we've handpicked incredible storytellers and inspiring people from across the nation to bring you a show about the meaning of home and all the rebuilding and reimagining that it requires, that will be charming, funny, relatable, and touching. So let's go ahead and say hi to our awesome storytellers. First up, we have Ashley Harbinson from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We have LEESA McGregor from Vancouver, Canada. CHANDA McGuffin from Waynesboro, Virginia. Sean Ewert from Los Angeles, California. And Dawn Olsen from Indianapolis, Indiana. You guys look so awesome. So great to see you guys, and I can't wait to hear your stories. So before we get into tonight's show, I would also want to share my personal meaning of home. In my life, I've experienced homelessness and abandonment. While living in a homeless shelter, I felt the most alone. But it was the very same shelter where I found that a true home is made up of those who share a common understanding of life's hardship, but also the joy that life brings. So from whichever home that you are joining us from, thank you for being a part of tonight. And also tonight, I'll let you know what tonight is going to be. It's not going to be a TED Talk, a Toastmasters, a how-to talk, an inspirational speech, an educational lecture, or even a PowerPoint slideshow. We won't tell you anything, but maybe a subscription to one of our awesome publications. But this is storytelling, and storytelling is based on visiting. You open your heart and your mind, and you pay attention to a person you care about and want to feel closer to. So we invite you to do that tonight. To prepare, some of these storytellers will be polished and professional. Some will be casual and conversational. We ask you to receive all of them because that's how community change happens. I will also let you know that one of tonight's stories talks about suicide. The National Suicide Prevention Line is available 24/7 at 1-800-273-8255 in English and 1-800-628-9454 in Spanish. It's free and confidential for those in distress who need prevention or crisis resources for themselves or their loved ones. And we believe creating empathy and understanding is vital, and especially in times of uncertainty. And so with that, I'm excited to bring up our first storyteller, Dawn Olsen. Please take it away.
When I was 11, I fell in love for the first time. And that unconditional, irrevocable love started the moment my teacher handed me the Scholastic Book Club flyer. Each page was fragile, and the paper was as stale as the coffee in the teacher's lounge. But I knew there was knowledge in there, that there was potential. Several weeks after circling my pick in red crayon, the book arrived. Bloomability, a book about a girl my age who had the opportunity to go to an international boarding school in Switzerland. I had never read anything like it before. So when I turned the cover and cracked open the spine, it was like opening the door to Narnia. Suddenly, different cultures and backgrounds and beliefs, this whole world enveloped me. And I was absolutely enchanted, just dazzled by the prospect of learning Italian and swapping clothes with international friends and learning how to ski in the Alps. Just knowing that those experiences existed was exciting because they weren't something I was ever going to find in my hometown. I grew up in rural Iowa where doors go unlocked and gossip runs deep. There are no stoplights in my hometown, and the only drive-through is for the bank. You know, we don't have a grocery store, and there's no pharmacy either. But we do have a mall. It's called Casey's. You might be familiar with it, but if you're not, just know that Casey's is a chain of gas stations. So there's your usual milk, donuts, coffee, but they also have taco pizza, which is the only time lettuce is an acceptable topping for a pizza. But yeah, when you go to Casey's in the morning for your cup of coffee and a glazed donut, you'll likely stand in line with one of the farmers whose voices are as bristly as their 5 o'clock shadow. That's where I come from, Treynor, Iowa. It's a close-knit community, which means everyone already knows about the skeletons in your closet. My family skeleton was living in poverty. When I say I grew up poor, I mean my mom made $9,000 a year. She and my brother and I lived in a ramshackle house on the south side of town with a cornfield with a backyard and a garage that doubled as an Airbnb for possums. The house itself was 100 years old with a roof to match. Over the years, animals found their way in and colonized the attic. And the roof started leaking, and after that, the ceiling started collapsing, and mudroom, the kitchen, you name it. The shower wall was just this plastic curtain covering the studs, and we actually didn't have a phone for 3 years. We also didn't really have running water for 2 years. My boyfriend at the time said that normal people didn't live like that the way my family lived was embarrassing. He said that to me. Was I jealous of families who got to go on vacations and skiing trips and boating trips? Absolutely. Was I envious of my classmates and their name brands and their unintentional entitlement to those things? Yeah. But that's just how it was. I knew we were poor. The whole town knew we were poor. But I had never felt ashamed until my boyfriend said I should be. I resolved to leave Treynor the day a classmate said homosexuals were an abomination. As soon as he said it, there was anger as red and as hot and as fast as lightning. And at the time, I didn't have the poetry of language to explain why I was upset. I just knew that I was. What you have to understand about Treynor is that it's a place where the words Democrat and atheist are swear words. That wasn't where I wanted to be. I wanted what was in bloomability, adventure and travel and opportunity to be myself without being judged. I was always uncomfortable with how small-minded people could be and how easy it was for them to embrace hatred. And that was not the life that I wanted. When people ask me now where I come from, I usually say I'm originally from Iowa, but I graduated from Purdue. I like to joke that I went to an out-of-state engineering school to get an English degree, but Purdue fit. The moment my mom and I visited campus for the first time and rounded Wetherill and saw the bell tower, my heart just expanded beyond my physical body. This is it. The problem was that we were so broke we couldn't even afford to waste time. And right before my senior year started, I got my bill. I was $13,000 short. I wrote to financial aid and told them I would have to drop out if I couldn't find funding. I told them how many times we had been denied private loans. I did not ask them for sympathy. I only asked them to understand. 2 weeks later, financial aid got back to me. They were covering every penny. And I'm still grateful for that. Because of their help, that year I was able to have potlucks with my friends. We were from different countries, the States, Singapore, France, Malaysia, and we would take turns making our favorite meals for each other. toward the end of the year, I bought us all tickets for this multicultural food festival at a local church. Walking into the festival, I was assaulted and a little turned on by all of the smells and colors and languages. And I felt like I was 11 all over again, you know, with knobby knees and newly pierced ears and bloomability. It was sobering. You know, when I first read this book, I had wanted the world. And here in the basement of this church, I found it in the form of vindaloo and ratatouille and injera, tapas, ramen, and currywurst. And I was absolutely humbled to ashes, because here I was 10 years later, feeling like I had made good on a promise I had made to myself. That was sort of my gateway to travel. Currently, I'm at 40 states and 5 countries. And I believe that had I grown up in a family that was more financially fortunate, I wouldn't appreciate the world as much as I do. This past June, I went back to Treynor for the first time in a year and a half. And while everything was familiar, the town still felt different. That is, it felt different until I realized that it was me who had changed. There was this juxtaposition of who I was before, a person who ordered fries from a place named after farm equipment, and who I was now, a person who had eaten falafel from a street vendor in Jerusalem. Don't get me wrong. I'm proud of where I come from, and I'm proud of how I grew up. But I don't fit in there anymore. I'm the 501st piece in a 500-piece puzzle. But I am from Treynor. I will always be from Treynor. But home is now where my bookshelves are and where I have room for my books. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for bringing us along on your journey, Dawn. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So yeah, next up is Ashley Harbinson from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. How you doing? Oh.
The first time I met Hank, the nurse awkwardly placed him on my chest. And once I got a good look at him, I turned my head and just started dry heaving. Don't get me wrong, he was adorable, cute kid. Could have been the drugs or the nerves, whatever it wasn't what I saw in those commercials where the woman has the baby and she's like glowing but sweating, and she gives birth to like a really clean baby, and then her partner kisses her and it's sweet. It was nothing like that. In fact, it was like less than a 30-second commercial of time that we spent together. They just took him to the NICU. 8 hours later, I met Hank again. I was wheeled to his little plastic box of a crib, and he had a CPAP machine, which made him look like a little elephant. He was the sweetest little elephant I ever saw. He was so cute that I had to look for a name tag to see if he was really ours. And the nurse asked me if I wanted to hold him. Typically, a mother doesn't say no to holding her baby, but I didn't want to hold him. I said absolutely, and I held him for about 2 minutes. He was too connected to tubes. He had a feeding tube and wires and the breathing mask and all that. And I probably didn't hold him as long as I should have. Who knows? But Hank was considered a late preemie, born about 5.5 weeks early. Totally ready for the world, though. Total Spitfire. Kicked out every IV that went into him. Pulled his own feeding tubes out. He was very strong-willed and determined despite having literally no life experience. He was pretty much ready for the world. So the next couple of weeks, beeping machines and breast pumps became the new soundtrack to our lives as parents. Andrew, my husband, would just stare at the monitor, and I would just pump and pray. And I only prayed when I was feeling like really scared and helpless. I was definitely feeling both. I think the last time I prayed before then, I tried to strike up a deal with God to not get my period on our wedding day. And not knowing how prayer works, I was like, oh no, I wasted all my prayers. So while Hank continued his little quest and his raising, he was pretty much raising hell in the NICU. Andrew and I were just catching up to our new reality a week before we were assembling a crib. Well, I wasn't, he was, I don't do that. And now we were talking about a ventilator for our son. Things got really real, really quickly. And I would find like little ways to escape, to like run in my room and just look out the window and cry. And he would just run errands and keep the family updated. But throughout it all, we never forgot to post on Instagram. Millennials, right? But the days went by and Hank got better. And while I was excited, my excitement was met with zero confidence in my ability to take care of this child. For instance, if an alert went on, I would just get the hell out of there, let the professionals do what they need to do, because it was very clear that he needed them and not me. And my anxiety only got worse when we were asked questions like, who's Hank's pediatrician, as if we knew. I didn't know that I had to do that. But Andrew happily learned how to change a diaper while I was taught how to properly burp my baby. If we were being graded on swaddling, we both failed. Swaddling is hard, but my husband used to work at Wawa, so I thought his burrito rolling skills would carry us through. They did not. But nursing, I could do nursing. You know why? Because I took a class. Expert, okay? Through the act of breastfeeding, motherhood would now become natural, not so clinical. And once I release the milk, I'll release my anxiety and release the endorphins or whatever hormone that is. I still don't know. And it would all make sense. Motherhood would make sense now. So I bring my baby up to my bosom with my husband by my side in slow-mo. And a nurse just walks by and goes, shove him in. I didn't remember that being in the class. So our big moment of connection pretty much ended in me topless and embarrassed and disappointed, like most first dates that I've ever had. What was going on here? Where the hell were my motherly instincts? Why did I need so much coaching? Hank was getting better. I was getting worse. What about the mama bear thing? I wasn't a mama bear. I was an anxious milk machine. Instead of focusing on Hank, I stared at his monitor. The beeps were constantly in my head, always. I wanted to feel the connection, but I just couldn't because I was too anxious. Andrew went back to work, leaving me by myself in the NICU to be the monitor's monitor. And, you know, it kind of sucked. We were a team. So I spent a lot of my time listening to nurses' conversations, which were mostly about food. I YouTubed how to take care of a newborn way too many times. And every time a nurse would ask me if I needed anything, I would be like, oh, no, I'm good. It's all good here, which really meant don't discharge us. I have no idea what I'm doing. But alas, Hank was due for discharge. The doctor did her final examination, and she decided that he hadn't gained enough weight to be discharged that day after all. Now, I should have been disappointed, right? I wasn't. I was relieved. I was relieved that we got more time in the NICU because I wasn't ready. And that made me feel very guilty because there was a lot of parents in that NICU who wanted to take their kids home. Hank was almost ready. Andrew was definitely ready. And I was ready to move in there until Hank was ready to finish high school. Okay, that's kind of where I was. Well, Hank got discharged the next day. And walking out, I said to the nurses, you know, you guys can come home with us. And they giggled, but I was dead serious. Home sweet home. I decided the first night that Hank was there that I would never sleep again, that I would be his monitor. And I did just that. Visitors were a great distraction. In the beginning, you know, you can kind of put on a show, just act like everything's all good. You're just so distracted, you know. But I think a couple people saw through that. For instance, my sister-in-law came for a visit, and it was very clear to her that I needed a shower, whether it was just by looking at me or smelling me. And I did. I took the shower, and as the water hit my back, I remember thinking, you know what, he might be better off with her. I could just get out of here. I could sneak out the bathroom window. It could be all over. But then I remember we lived on a third floor apartment, so that wasn't really going to work. When I went to my postpartum delivery visit, when you go see the doctor after you had a baby, I still don't even know what it's called. I'm such a great adult. I had to fill out a form for postpartum depression to kind of see where you're gauged. And I thought, okay, great. I'll like ace this because I'm not depressed. I'm obsessed. I have postpartum obsession. I'm obsessed that I am going to hurt my child. by accident, not intentionally, but by accident. And so there's no form for that. So I'll just breeze through this, and made a couple jokes with the doctor. We had a couple good laughs, and I just laughed myself out of the office as though I wasn't losing my mind. And that's how we existed in that little 3rd floor apartment. I didn't sleep. He was growing. I was losing weight. I was also losing my mind and becoming very compulsive. I decided that we were going to move to Philly to be closer to family and friends, which makes sense. It's a very natural thing to do, except I did that because I thought that if we were closer to family and friends, he would have a better chance of survival instead of being home with me all the time in case something went wrong. In Philly, I continued my act of not sleeping. Still would not allow Andrew to drive Hank anywhere by himself. Though, if you experience my husband's driving, I feel like you would have my back. I feel like you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense, Ashley. But the lack of sleep really started to get to me in the form of believing that my son was choking and calling an ambulance. An ambulance came to pick us up on a very, very cold and icy winter night. We were admitted to the hospital. Then we were transferred to another hospital. My son was monitored all night. My husband let me do the talking to the doctors while I was wasting time and resources, because the truth was he wasn't choking, but I thought he was, probably because I was losing my mind. And they spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was wrong with this child. The next morning, a team of doctors stood around us in a circle, and they were troubleshooting, just trying to get to the bottom of what could have happened to him. And I just wanted to scream. I just wanted to be like, yo, it's not him. He's fine. We all know he's fine. It's me. I'm the problem, because I keep thinking that he's not fine, and I haven't slept in 8 months, and I feel like I'm going crazy, and I'm so scared. I'm so scared to be a mom. Of course, I didn't say that, but it all made sense to me. Why wouldn't I be scared? Why didn't I? Of course, I reacted this way to motherhood. I've been this way my whole life. As a kid, it took me forever to get home from school, because every crack I was afraid of, because if I stepped on a crack, not only would I break my mother's back, I would kill her. And then it would be my fault that my mom died. This is how I lived. I always had panic attacks since I was 5. I had phobias, just untreated. Of course, I discovered alcohol as a teenager, but it wasn't until my positive pregnancy test at 31 that I actually made an honest effort to quit drinking. Of course, after a week of my son being born, I went back to it. See, I've always walked this life very, very anxious, but I've always been able to cover it up. I took a job in mental health. I always compared myself to everybody else. I'm not like that. I'm not as sick as that. But maybe I was, because I hallucinated my son choking. I decided that day when we went home, I would do what I needed to do to get the help, which for me was in the form of counseling and medication for me. And 5 years later, we're back home in Lancaster, probably more connected than we've ever been as a family of 3. And I don't want to brag, but I now step on all the sidewalk cracks I want. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Dawn. That was so powerful, and I truly admire your story of motherhood. That was great. And I think we all had irrational fear of stepping on the cracks to break your mother's back. I know I at least had that irrational fear. I would always go home and be like, Mom, are you okay? After walking home from school. So I shared that. But anyway, thank you so much. So Dorothy wasn't mistaken when she said there's no place like home. Next to homemade baked goods, there's no place better to purchase your treats than fairy tale brownies. Brownies, cookies, and blondies are freshly baked in small batches, individually wrapped, hand-packed, and custom-designed gift boxes, and are freshly baked in small batches. And they're shipped to your door. Whether you're planning a family weekend or a special Halloween or fall get-together, be sure to include the delicious fairy tale treats. Enter for a chance to win a brownie gift and receive a discount on your next purchase. The link is posted in the comments. So next up, our next storyteller up is CHANDA McGuffin. Please take it away, CHANDA.
I didn't come into the world alone. Approximately 9 minutes before me was my twin brother, Channing. He would pave the way for me. We have a brother, Shaquille, who is 7 years older than us. He would be a father figure to us. He still remains like that today. My son, Shaquille Channing, and I live in beautiful Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Did you hear my son's name? Yeah. Home is family to us. Family is everything to us. We didn't grow up in a bed of roses, though. Although my father was sober for 25 years before he died, the alcoholism that we incurred throughout our childhood was still ever present. It went even into us becoming adults, the effects of the alcoholism. The domestic violence with my mom and my dad was deafening to me. On one hand, I loved my father. On one hand, I adored him, and on the other hand, I hated him for what he did to my father. And I internalized that within me. That's probably why I was physically ill most of my childhood. I remember looking up at the sky and I said, God, I promise you that if I ever have children, they're going to be raised in a home of peace. Well, I'm thankful my son has been raised in a home of peace. My mom was able to help me to provide that home for him, something she wasn't able to do for her own 3 children. I always loved younger children. Even when I was a child, I loved other children. I wanted them to be safe and secure. And I just loved them. And I could spend countless hours. As I was getting ready to go to James Madison University, because my parents were so big on education for us, and all of us have advanced degrees. As I was getting ready to go, my father walked into the room and starkly announced to my brother and I that we had another brother. We were so angry at him. Those feelings of resentment and anger and hurt from him and the effects of the alcoholism just came flooding back. But boy, did I see my brother Antoine and loved him. We loved him. We embraced him as a family. Because remember, I told you family is everything to us. And he was part of us, regardless of the circumstances. I know you think when I graduated from JMU that I went into teaching or social work so I could help children because of my love and passion for children. But I didn't. I went into the financial industry. Most of my career was in banking. And what did I do? I bought the children in the bank. I taught them financial literacy and the importance and the value of money and how to be responsible with money and the careers that can happen through banking, because I had never been exposed to banking in that way as a child, never even thought about being a branch manager in banking. And so hopefully I have laid some foundation for those children that they get on a financial strong ground for their future from that experience. One day I went to the doctor, thought it was a routine doctor's appointment, and the doctor looks at me and she says, Chanda, you're not going to be able to work anymore. I immediately got sad. Depression just dropped right on me in the midst of it. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? My whole life and identity is in my career. And she said, find a hobby. Well, I had met my business partner, Sharon, about 3 or 4 months prior to that, and we were trying to charter a new NAACP branch. But the national organization did not approve the charter. So instead of losing, the momentum of how we had built and was starting to grow and work within this community, Sharon said, let's not give up. Let's start our own organization. After thinking for just a little while and going to our field trip, we call it a field trip to the Black History Museum here in our city, Sharon walked in, and she walked in fierce and she walked in powerful. She was determined. And when I saw her, I said, that's my partner. I know that we were meant to take care of these children together, because she cared about kids as much as I cared about them. And so right at the moment, Rise was born. Rise's mission is to give hope, voice and hope back to the Black community. We do that through education with the children of an after-school program and a summer school. We do that with corporate anti-racism training. And we do that by getting civic engagement and involvement. And everything leads back to these children. Our civic engagement is not political. It's about giving voice to our children to be able to speak to politicians who are going to represent them and understand what it means for them to use their voice in activism for themselves. This has allowed us to be able to reach all over the country at this point, because we can reach all over virtually. We have in this small little city we work out of, but we touch all across Virginia and all across the country in little pockets across Virginia, changing lives every single day. The after school program, the very first time we had a young girl that came in, and I remember looking over at her, and she looked at me and I looked at her, and I knew she was me. And I said, I know what she needs. So I took her to my hip and I spent more time with her. I gave her a safe place like my godmother had done for me. She had been my safety net. I was like the teachers that had been in my life who saw a light in me when I was just a little girl. I was like my college advisor, Mrs. Strawbridge, who saw a fire in me when I was just a young woman, that I would be able to go and change the world. I saw that in this little girl, and I wanted her to be able to connect to her future. She went back to school. She is now thriving. She's in middle school. She stands taller than me. She has the confidence that is unbelievable because of that time. I shared only one story with you, but there's tens of 20s and 30 children that we have just touched and changed their lives by just one-on-one caring about them and meeting them where they need. I am so glad to be able to have shared my story with you today, because it is my 50th birthday. Happy birthday to me. It is so important that I be able to look back on my life on this particular day to see where I am right now, because it was imperative. You can do anything you set your mind to, no matter where you began. We live another day to rise.
Oh man, thank you for that. I feel like getting up and jogging after, like, or doing something after, like, hearing your awesome, like, powerful story. I appreciate that so much. And are you sure? Are you sure it's not your 30th birthday?
I know. Don't I look good?
You look amazing. Hold up now. Goodness gracious.
Yes.
There you go. There you go. Well, again, thank you for sharing your story. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Now, please welcome Sean EWERT. Please take it away.
I sneeze myself awake at 2 a.m. in Chicago, Illinois. I have never felt like this before. I check my cell phone and I have a voicemail. It's from the LA County coroner. Her name is Colleen and she's an investigator. It's about my parents and I'm to call her right away. So the first thing, of course, I do as a good spouse, I wake up my partner who's sleeping soundly next to me. Something tells me there won't be any more sleep tonight. So John and I look at each other and we decide that this must be spam. This is a joke. So we go to the internet and we look up Colleen from the LA County investigator, and I can still feel the pit of my stomach when her name and her smiling face pop up on the screen. This, unfortunately, was real. I call the LA County coroner and a woman answers. She's super nice. I'm very composed. And she says, here's your file. It's your mother. She's committed suicide with a gun. And my father? Is he there too? Oh, no, he had a mild heart issue and some PTSD. We sent him to the hospital. Here's the phone number. I thank the woman for helping me, and I say, I'll be out to Los Angeles just as soon as I can. And she says, oh, take your time. Take your time. Your mother's safe with us. And I think to myself, this is very odd, but it's good to know that the dead are safe. So somehow, from 2,000 miles away, I find my father roaming around a gift shop. An older version of my father picks up the phone and he says, well, she finally did it. And then we talk like not a day has passed. He's really weirdly calm. I think it's the drugs they gave him. I tell him I'm going to be out to LA as soon as I can. Now, I've been out to my parents since 1991, but they never met anyone I ever dated. You know, it's one thing to say you're gay, and it's another thing to say, this is the guy I'm gay with. So I was really nervous about wrapping up the loose ends of my mother's life, but I was also kind of nervous about bringing a boyfriend home for the first time at 46 years old. I approach my father's tract house, his mustard yellow tract home, and there's a bullet hole in the side of the house. I guess this really did happen. I clear away the cobwebs and I knock on the door. And a man who looks like my grandfather answers. My boy, he says. And he gives me a great big hug. And whoa, he's smaller than I remember. And with an arm outstretched, like I'm introducing a co-star, I say, and this is John. And he goes, of course it is. And gives him a great big hug. This is going pretty well. I look over my dad's shoulder into the house, and there's furniture in weird places. There's piles of paper and yarn, and I can see my mother's room. I can just feel her energy blocking the door. My mother had an issue with paper and yarn. Both had built up in the house over many decades. While we were cleaning out and excavating the piles, there were some disturbing discoveries. There were a lot, and I mean a lot, of suicide notes. Some were half written, some were completed, but they all were addressed to my father. And then I find it under a very big pile of paper, the one note addressed to me. It said, Sean, I hope you have a happy and long life. My decision has nothing to do with you. I read the note to my dad. He doesn't look up. I put the note in my pocket. We worked for days, hauling out the memories, stopping to laugh and cry with my dad. My dad overheats. So does the paper shredder. Dad has to go lie down. We take away 7 truckloads in the Chevy Blazer to Goodwill. We get a dumpster from the city and we fill that too. John ends my mother's online life. No more Amazon orders of paper and yarn. Dad drives us to Forest Lawn to process my mother. We're in a hurry. We're not in town long. We explain that no, we don't want a memorial service, and she's at the morgue. A tall, handsome young man in a black Banana Republic suit escorts us through the process. He shows us a vast array of remembrance jewelry. Would we like an amulet to remember Mother by with some of her ashes in it? And out of nowhere, my father says, oh no, she won't have a toehold in this world. So then he shows us another array of cremation vessels. Now, John is particularly drawn to a strange wicker basket that looks like it was made for baby Jesus. I start to get the giggles thinking about my mother sitting in this thing, waving through the port of Los Angeles. We decide on a beautiful papyrus urn that will dissolve ecologically into the ocean, sort of releasing her ashes like a bartender mixing a drink. The tall, handsome young man runs up to John and says, oh, I need you. Come this way. And he's got a big drop-down menu on the wall, and he's going to use John as a witness, and he's searching for words to like partner or boyfriend. None of that is there. So we choose friend, which is really lovely since my mother didn't have any friends. At least we gave her one for the record. Now, this entire time, by my right foot, in a plastic bag, I've had a nightgown for my mother. And I was told to bring it so she would be clothed during the cremation process, which is something I never even particularly thought of. So this whole time, I'm knowing that this is sort of going to end the whole session. And the moment came to hand it to the tall, handsome young man. I got to tell you, it was a very, very strange feeling. The tall, handsome young man gets everything together. And he says, okay, all right. So we're done. And now it's time to work with Captain Lee. Now, Captain Lee is going to be present with your mother at the end. And would you like to go out with Captain Lee? Captain Lee, Captain Lee. You know, in this crazy situation, he keeps saying Captain Lee over and over again. And I get the nervous giggles. So does John. So does my father. And finally, I say, what the heck is Captain Lee? And the tall, handsome young man, he's so composed. He says, well, Captain Lee, it's his boat. You're going to go out with Captain Lee, and he will be there with your mom at the end, and you dump the ashes. Do you want to go out with him? All three of us politely decline. I get seasick easily. But the respect and dignity that the tall, handsome young man gives my mother through this entire process is absolutely beautiful. So on this visit back to Los Angeles to take care of the loose ends of my mother's life, I start calling my father Dad the whole time. It just kind of happened. Now, the reason why this is super interesting is my parents told me, especially my mother, wanted my family to always be called by first names. I had to use first names for everybody. And I was an only child. It was really snotty, and I had to defend it for years. But on this visit, I called him Dad, and my dad answered. And he seems to like it. And I feel more like his son being able to call him Dad. My dad says, how do you feel about all of this? And I say, relieved. Is that wrong? And he says, no. It's time to go back to Los Angeles, to leave Los Angeles and go to Chicago, and I don't want to go home. I give my dad a great big hug, and John and I walk to the rental car. And my father says, hey, John, where's my hug? He lost his wife, but he gained a son-in-law and a grand dog. And I really, really know what it's like now to be a son.
Thank you for introducing us to your mother, Sean, and thank you for showing that vulnerability to share such a powerful story.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And again, the National Suicide Prevention Line is available 24/7 at 1-800-273-8255 in English and 1-800-88-628-9454 in Spanish. Again, it's free and confidential for those in distress who need prevention or crisis resources for themselves or loved ones. Please reach out if you need to. So last but not least of our storytellers is LEESA McGregor. She's going to bring home our show. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. I think my desire to make a meaningful difference and change the world started at a very young age for me. And little did I know that after having my son, my whole world would change, and that I would change the world in the form of a children's book. Growing up, I had a mom who was a change maker. She worked in natural health, and she was the kind of woman who was always questioning the status quo. She dedicated her life's work to helping people with their health and their well-being, long before that was a thing. And my dad was a futurist. He actually worked in the printing industry, but somehow he had this ability to predict the future. And he knew things like Apple was going to be one of the most valuable companies in the world 10 years before that happened. And what I realized is that my parents both had a different way of looking at things, and somehow that shaped me. And so when I graduated from high school, I knew I wanted to do something big in the world. I knew I wanted to do something impactful. I just wasn't sure what that was. And so after graduating, I went to college and I did everything society told me to do. You know, that whole concept of get out there and achieve and build your career. And I set off to build a career in business. And by the time I was 25, I had traveled all around the world. I'd traveled to 25 countries. I'd built a technology startup. I'd worked in corporate. I'd climbed the ladder. I'd achieved everything that I ever wanted. All the things that society told me were important. And on the outside, I appeared as though I was very successful. And on the inside, I felt deeply unfulfilled. Deeply, deeply unfulfilled. I started asking the question, is this all there is? That nagging question would not leave me. I remember clearly being in a boardroom one day at work, and I was delivering this big presentation for a project I'd worked on for months and months. And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking to myself, if I'm supposedly so successful, why do I feel so unhappy and so unfulfilled? And I can bring myself back to that moment with you right now because it was so painful to me. Everything that I had achieved, everything that I had worked towards meant nothing to me. And I started soul searching. During the day, I'd find myself working away in my ivory tower. And at night, I would go to my yoga studio and I'd lay on my yoga mat and I'd cry. And I'd ask myself the question, is this all there is? I wanted my life to feel meaningful. I wanted my work to feel meaningful. I wanted to feel happy inside. And I started writing in my journal. I started a practice in the evenings. I started writing, what is my purpose? What am I here for? What am I meant to do? And then all of a sudden, one day, this question came to me. How can I make a meaningful difference to the health and the well-being of people and the planet? And I started living in that question. I wanted to know the answer. I ended up leaving that corporate job and I took the big leap to starting my own business. And for the next few years, I did a lot of soul searching. And then when my son was born, my whole world changed. Not only did I feel responsible for him, but I felt a greater sense of responsibility to make the world better. I wanted to do something more than ever that would impact my son, and it would impact other people and other children of the world. And I was inspired by my great mentor after reading his book. He shared this idea of being a good ancestor. And he talked about doing work in the world that would impact future generations. And I got really inspired by that idea. And I started writing in my journal again at night. How can I make a difference? How can I positively impact my son's generation and future generations? And how can I make a difference in education? I'd always been passionate about that idea of making some sort of change. And then one day I was at the beach with my son. He was 3. And I had my eureka moment. My son looked at me. And it was like his soul was speaking to me. It's like he was saying to me, Mom, what else have you got for me? I realized as he was looking at me that I did everything I thought I was supposed to do. I taught him letters, I taught him numbers, I taught him colors, I taught him all of those things I thought were important. But what about the heart? What about the language of the heart? And in that very moment, I got this idea to write a list of alphabet words that I could teach to my son, to teach him words that were meaningful and impactful. So instead of teaching him things like A is for apple, B is for ball, C is for cat, what about A is for abundance, B is for bravery, C is for compassion, D is for diversity? And this idea just came streaming through me. And I had my notepad. I'm writing down these words as fast as I can think of them. And I came home and I shared them with my husband, and he nearly fell on the floor. He said, Lisa, you've just rewritten the alphabet. And I thought to myself, this is something. And I shared it with a couple of friends, and they said, Lisa, you've got to do something with this. So I started teaching my son these words, and within a couple of weeks, he was reciting this new alphabet. And I knew that this was the time for me to do something. There was something in me that knew that this was something for the world. And so I decided, well, I'd written a previous children's book, and that was a really fulfilling project. So why don't I write a new book and create a new alphabet for humanity. So I launched a crowdfunding campaign to test this idea. I made myself so vulnerable. I put this idea out into the world, and I thought, let's see what happens. And within 24 hours, my campaign was funded, literally overnight. And I realized that I wasn't the only parent that wanted this kind of education for their child. This whole idea of having an education of the heart. Little did I know that 12 months later, I would have started a movement toward a more loving and compassionate world. In the first 12 months of launching this body of work, which is so, so dear to my heart, I can hardly believe what's happened. We've had parents and grandparents write into me from all over the world talking about the difference that the book has made in their lives and how the book is going to be passed down to future generations. I've had schools write into me, schools and early learning centers, buying the book and sharing it with everybody they know. I have grandparents that come to me and they say, I'd like a book. And then they come back and they get 10 more books and they share that with everyone that they have in their friends and their community. And to this day, what just brings me back to this whole concept of making a meaningful difference is my son. He talks about empathy. He talks about compassion. It's like this vocabulary is just his. It just came to be. I had a mother that wrote into me sharing just what a difference it made for her because her daughter was declared legally blind. And she noticed that her daughter started picking up my book and she started looking through the pages and she would point to the illustrations and she would look at that and she would talk to her mom. And her mom realized that her daughter wasn't blind, that her daughter could see thanks to this book. I had another mom write into me saying that her autistic son was having such a hard time and that she literally taught him to read with my book. These are stories that will never leave me. These are stories that never in a million years could I have ever imagined making the difference that I would make in the form of a children's book. And it's more than just a children's book. It's about creating a bright future. And if there's anything that I've learned from this experience, you're never too small to make a difference. Thank you for listening.
I feel like getting up again and running, man. I tell you what, that was so inspiring. Thank you so much, Lisa. That was thank you for changing the alphabet into something much brighter and useful for future generations. Thank you so much. That was great. Great
Thank
story.
you.
Thank you. All right. Well, that's our show. And before we adjourn, let's bring up all the amazing storytellers back up one more time, please. There you guys go. Back up again. So again, guys, thank you all again, especially Ashley, not Emily. Thank you again for being a part of this this evening and just sharing your amazing stories. I could not be more thankful for that. Thank you. All right. And so to the audience, whether these stories have been a reflection of your own experiences or an eye-opening experience to a better understanding of a story you may have not been familiar with, we hope that you enjoyed your time and hope you have a great night and a great rest of your week. Blessings.